Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yudal, Daf 14, Masechta Moed Katan. Friends, we're starting the third parak, L'maaseh, of Masechta Moed Katan, and here we begin transitioning into Avelus, mourning. The halach is about mourning when somebody passes away. We're starting a new parak. It begins with talking about who is allowed to shave, to get haircuts, who is allowed to wash their clothing on Chol HaMoed, and then we sort of segue into Avelus and mourning. So friends, we're going to jump in over here on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis at the new parak, 4 lines in the bottom. Ve'elu megalchin ba'moed. The following people are permitted to get haircuts on Chol HaMoed. I wonder why my throat is a little dry. Let's see, what should I do? Maybe that'll work. Let's go weiter. These are the people who can get haircuts on Chol HaMoed. Sorry to keep you hanging over there. Habam Medina Sayam. A fellow comes from traveling, from overseas. Umibeis Hashivya, or a fellow was in captivity, and then he is freed from captivity. Vayotz Umibeis Asurin, a fellow who comes out of prison. Vamenuda Sheitiru Lo Chachamim, and a fellow who was excommunicated. Fellow is excommunicated, and then the Chachamim say, fellow, you're no longer excommunicated. So, let's say you have a fellow, and he says, I ain't never getting haircuts again. For the record, I never said that. It's just haircuts are not, I don't remember if I've discussed this recently. It's not really very important, but getting a haircut right now just is not a priority for me. Also, I'm shtickle nudnik plays into it also. Wow, there's really no need for me to get into that. But upon him, you have a fellow who says, I ain't never getting no haircuts. And then he goes to a rabbi, and he's like, hey rabbi, about that, my parents are really upset with me, and they need me to get a haircut, otherwise they're going to be braggers. So the rabbi's like, ooh, alright. And he says, okay, you can get a haircut. So that guy also, V'anazir, V'amutzora, and a fellow who is like a nazir, right? He says, for a certain amount of time, I'm gonna be a nazir. I'm not gonna drink wine. I'm not gonna become tamei meis, and all sorts of things, including not getting a haircut. V'amutzora, a fellow who has leprosy, skin weird diseases. Mitumasul taroso. And so on the day that, so if you have a nazir who becomes tameh, so then if he becomes tameh, then it says that once he becomes tahor again, so he shaves his head and he starts over. And also mitzora, right, when he becomes tahor, he's no longer mitzora, so then he shaves his head as well. So they could shave, so they can get a haircut also, and they'll shave their heads, I guess, also on Chol HaMoed. So all of these people are able to get haircuts on Chol HaMoed. Okay? The following people can do laundry on Chol HaMoed. Haba Medina Sayam, a fellow who comes back from overseas. Umibeis Hashivya, or a fellow who is in captivity. Vayos Umibeis Hasurin, a fellow who is let out of prison. Umenuda Sheitiru Lo Chachamim, and a fellow who is excommunicated. But the rabbis say, hey fellow, you're no longer excommunicated. Come join us. He can do laundry. Also a fellow who said, I ain't never doing laundry ever again, and he realized that probably wasn't a good idea, and then so he goes to a rabbi. He's like, hey, by the way, I want to do laundry, and he lets him do laundry again, and so he could do that. Mitpachos hayodayim, hand towels. Mitpachos hasaparim, hair cutter towels. Mitpachos hasfag, and bath towels. Hazovin v'hazovos, v'anidos v'hayoledos, a zava, right? We know what these people are. Zav is some guy who sees zavi kind of stuff that I still haven't looked into since the last time, so I don't really know what it is, but zavi stuff. So he sees some zavi stuff, and he sees it 3 times, and he becomes a zav, and he becomes like a avatuma. It's a whole thing. He's got to see 7 days without seeing zavi stuff. Ve'azavos, a woman who within sort of the days that would not qualify as nida days, she sees 3 days in a row of dam, of blood, so then she's a zava. Ve'anidos, and a nida. Ve'ayoledos, and a woman who gives birth, and she's tamei for, depending on a boy or a girl, a week, 2 weeks. And anybody who was tameh and now becomes tahor, they can do laundry as well, but nobody else. Just a regular Joe does not do laundry on Chol Moed. He should do his laundry l'maisa before Chol Moed. Very interesting stuff, friends. Says the Gemara, "Ushar kol adam my taima asurin." How come everybody else is not allowed to get haircuts, not allowed to do laundry? Because it's not as we learn in Masechta, as we learn in the Mishnah in Masechta Tainis. Anshe Mishma v'Anshe Maimed, the people who serve in the the Kohanim, the Leviim, the people who sort of stand and support the Korbanis. So asurin the Saper l'Chabes. So during their week of service, so they do not get haircuts, they do not do laundry. And on Thursday they're allowed to get haircuts and do laundry out of the honor of Shabbos, in preparation for Shabbos. And says Rabbi Barbachana in the name of Rabbi Elazar, my taima, how come we say that the Anshe Mishmar and the Anshe Maimed do not get haircuts during the week of their service? In order to sort of encourage them, motivate them to get haircuts and clean up before they come, right? We don't want them showing up at the Beis Hamikdash, looking like they can use a haircut. So by saying sort of, well, you can't get a haircut once you show up, so it sort of encourage. I think the word I was looking for was encourages. It encourages them to sort of take care of this beforehand and to show up looking pristine. Hachanami here as well, and in the context of Chol Moed, so that they don't come to the festival looking like they need a haircut, looking like me. All right. So Reb Zera asked the kasha, Avdelo Aveda Erev Regel Mau. Oh, wow. Friends, you hear the kasha. Reb Zera asks, if you have a fellow, and the fellow loses a lost object on Erev, let's say Pesach, and he's so busy trying to find the lost object that he is unable to do laundry, he's unable to get a haircut. So Mau. So can you do these things then on Chol Moed? Kevan the honest mutter, do we say, look, Lemaise, he would have gotten a haircut, he would have done laundry, but he was busy trying to find this thing that got lost. So it was kind of out of his control, and therefore it's permitted. Or perhaps alternatively, or perhaps since nobody knows that, I don't look at his forehead and see this guy lost a lost object on Erev Pesach. No, all I know is that he looked like he can use a haircut yesterday, and now it looks like he got a haircut. And we don't know sort of the backstory about him and his lost object. And because we're a bunch of yentis, so we're going to assume that he was just being a nudnik and getting a haircut and not preparing. So because people don't know the backstories, and people left to their own devices are yentis, so therefore maybe then, even though he lost a lost object, he would not be allowed to get a haircut and do laundry. So Amar Abai says, Abai Yomu Kol Asrikin Asurin Srike Baitus Mutarin. So then Abai says, right, this was something that we saw in Masechta Pesachim, right? There was a shaila, can you make in your matzahs, can you make different kinds of shapes in your matzahs? So we say no, because the time that you'll spend making the shapes in the matzahs, maybe it'll become chametz. And then they say, yeah, but there was this bakery, the Baitus bakery, and over there they had special molds that just chick-chock, they can make the shapes that they want. So maybe there it would be okay, because they could do it very fast and it won't become chametz. So they say, yeah, but they're going to say something's weird over here. Kol asrik and asur, and I don't understand. Nobody's allowed to make these shapes. Srike baitus mutar, and all of a sudden, but baitus is allowed to. Something's weird here. Something's not right over here. So here as well, right? So if we allow this guy who got who lost an object to get a haircut and do laundry, they're gonna be like, what's the deal over here? I thought you're not allowed to do this. What's with this guy? How come he's allowed to get a haircut and do laundry? So the time, but then we ask the kasha. 1 second. Hadomer Reb Asi, the Reb Asi says, Omer Reb Yochanan, Kol mi she'en lo ela chaluk echad, mutar l'chabes b'chol hamoed. The Reb Asi says in the name of Reb Yochanan that if a fellow only has one garment, he's only got one thing to wear, and that's it. He's allowed to launder that one garment that he owns on Chol HaMoed. But over there as well, aren't we going to say, wait, what's the deal? How come this guy is allowed to do laundry on Chol HaMoed? They're not going to, right? They don't necessarily know that he only owns one thing. So, and for the Gemara Ha'itmar Allah, we said about that, Amar Mar Barav Ashi Ezura Mochiach Alav. Sort of his belt makes it clear that actually he does only have one article of clothing. Meaning, when he's washing his one article of clothing, what does he do? He takes something else, kind of covers himself up, wraps a belt on, and, it's clear that, he's not wearing anything under that, whatever he's using to cover himself up. Keilu, it actually is kind of clear in that case that he only has one article of clothing to wear, and that's why he's allowed to do laundry. However, in this case, it is less clear. You don't know that he lost an object, and therefore maybe he would not be allowed to get a haircut and do laundry on Chol HaMoed, even if he lost an object. Ravashi taught by Reb Zera. The Reb Zera asked, "Uman she'avdalo aveda erev haregel mau." Right? If you have a sort of skilled worker, let's say a hair cutter. You have a fellow, he cuts hair. Now that's the kind of thing that he's going to be very busy on Erev Chag. And therefore, if he lost an object, so then everyone's going to know, oh yeah, Moshe the hair cutter, he lost Tepis on Erev Chag, and it's 4 Sfiras HaOmer. I mean, everyone's running to get a haircut, so everyone's going to know that he lost an object. Do we say, look, since he's sort of like a publicly recognized, skilled fellow, so people are going to come in to get haircuts from the famous Moshe the barber, and he's not going to be there because he's busy searching for his lost object. So everyone's going to know that Moshe the famous barber lost his. We don't know what he lost, but it was something. So maybe then he can get a haircut and do do laundry on Chol HaMoed because everyone knows that he lost the epis on Erev Chag. Or Dilmar perhaps came to Lamucha Chamilsa Kianach Lo Teku. Or maybe since still, it isn't as clear off the bat, like let's say, this guy who's some of these other people, a fellow comes out of jail or something like that. This is less obvious. He lost epis. So maybe he would not be allowed to get a haircut on Chol HaMoed. So we say Teku, we say Ich weiß nicht. We say I don't know. Alright, friends, what do you want me to tell you? Let's move on. So a fellow, he comes l'maiseh from traveling. This is interesting. It's an interesting sugya. So a fellow arrives back home from his travels on Chol HaMoed. Fine. So maslisin d'lo Reb Yehuda. So we say that our Mishnah must not be like Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah says a fellow comes back from his travels, so he's allowed to get a haircut, he's allowed to wash his clothing, do laundry. This is not like Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya is learning the Brayso. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda Abba Medina Sayom, a fellow comes from overseas, lo yigalech. He's not allowed to get a haircut. He went out traveling, not because he was what is compulsory? Because he was compulsoried? No, that's not a thing. He was forced, I guess. I don't know. Meaning, right? It's not talking about a situation, right? For example, a fellow was in jail. He didn't go to jail for fun, right? A fellow was in captivity. He didn't go into captivity for fun, right? But over here, a fellow, by his own volition, went to travel. So that's not going to be a reason to allow him to get a haircut and do his laundry on Chol HaMoed. It was his choice to kind of be traveling and he kind of, I guess maybe he could have scheduled his traveling different, not to come back on Chol HaMoed, whatever it is. So therefore it's not he doesn't get an exception to that rule. He's not allowed to get a haircut and do laundry on Chol HaMoed according to Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rava. Says Rava. Ready for this? Lashut debeakol aser. If the fellow went traveling for fun, he was Christopher Columbus. He wanted to have a good time, start a travel vlog. He was a travel vlogger. And he, so it says everybody agrees. Both the Chachamim and our Mishnah who say that somebody who comes back from traveling, the Chachamim say that he's allowed to get a haircut and do laundry. Rabbi Yehuda says he's not. Everyone agrees. Even the Chachamim and our Mishnah agree that a travel vlogger who comes back to, comes back home on Chol Moed cannot do laundry and get a haircut. And everyone also agrees that if he had to go travel because he had to make a parnasa, he wasn't able to make a living where he lived, he had to travel somewhere else in order to make a living, otherwise he wouldn't have any food to eat. So everyone agrees that if he comes back, sure, he can do laundry and get a haircut because he really had to travel. It wasn't for fun, it was for out of necessity. Lo nechleku, where's the machlokas? Ela harvicha. What about sort of like a middle kind of area? What about you have a fellow who traveled in order to make more money, right? He's a businessman. Baruch Hashem, he's successful enough that he has some money in the bank. He could stay home and he'll have money to make yontif. But nonetheless, he traveled because there was an opportunity, and he traveled sort of to make more money. So that's kind of like a gray area in that he's not a travel vlogger. He's not going out for fun necessarily. Although I guess travel vloggers is a sort of business, I guess, I'll upon him. So forget about travel vloggers. A traveler, fellow goes on a tiyul. So it's not quite that he's going on a tiyul, and it's also not quite that he's going because he mamish is starving. Otherwise, I mean, he's a fellow who has money, but he went out to make more money. So mar medamile kilashut, mar medamile kilimzonis. So Rabbi Yehuda treats it the same as a fellow who goes out to have a good time somewhere. And the Chacham treat it like somebody who went out of necessity to get food. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda says that when it's leharviach, to make extra money, Rabbi Yehuda says it's aser, and the Chacham say that it is mutter to get a haircut and do laundry. Meisvei. We have a question. Friends, are you ready for the question? Omer Rebbe, says Rebbe, Nir and Divi Rabbi Yehuda. So I'm kind of compelled to side with Rabbi Yehuda. I understand Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Kishiyatza shelo b'rshus, when he went out without permission, then I agree with Rabbi Yehuda that he's not allowed to get a haircut and do laundry. And I agree with the Chachamim when he went out with permission. That when he went out with permission, I agree with the Chachamim that he's allowed to get a haircut and do laundry. So now the question is, we have like another two definitions now, right? Up until now we had lashut, which was for fun. We had limizonis, which was to get, be able to afford food to eat. And there was leharviach, which was to make more money. He's a businessman. But now we have two more definitions, which is without permission and with permission. So, my shelo b'rshus, what does it mean that he went without permission? Ilema lashut. If we're saying that he just went out for fun, and Rebbe is saying that he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda there that he would not be able to get a haircut and do laundry. But it's not just Rabbi Yehuda in that case. Even the Chachamim would agree that if he went out to have fun, he would not be allowed to do laundry and get a haircut when he comes back. Okay, so maybe without permission means he went out for mizonis, because he had nothing to eat otherwise. Then even Rabbi Yehuda would say over there that he's permitted to get a haircut and do laundry if he went out because Imam didn't have any food to eat otherwise. So Ella Pshita La'arvicha. So it must be that we're talking about a businessman. He went out because there were opportunities abroad, so he went out on business. So now Rebbe's saying that he sides with Rabbi Yehuda here, which is that he would not be allowed to get a haircut or do laundry when he comes back. But Ema Seifa, what if we continue? Rebbe also said that he sides with the Chachamim, who say that he's allowed to get a haircut and do laundry, when he went out with permission. And what does it mean with permission? My b'rshus, if it means that he went out to get food to eat, because otherwise he would have no other food to eat, everyone agrees then that he'd be allowed to get a haircut and do laundry. Even Rabbi Yehuda would agree with that. So okay, fine. So then I guess we're talking about when he's a businessman and he's going out to make some, to chase an opportunity. to be able to go for an opportunity. But we just said a minute ago that Rabbi Yehuda would say that Rebbe would say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that he would not be allowed to get a haircut and do laundry if he's going for business. So Hachi ka'amar, this is how you have to understand Rebbe's opinion. Niren divrei Rabbi Yehuda lirabanon, that Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the rabbis that he's allowed to get a haircut and do laundry k'shiyatzu shelo b'rshus, when he went out. I'm sorry, one second. Niren divrei Rabbi Yehuda lirabanon. I'm sorry, I don't know what I just said, but the rabbis agree with Rabbi Yehuda that he would not be allowed to get a haircut and do laundry k'shiyatzu shelo b'rshus, when he went out without permission. Umayniu lashut, just to have a good time. So in that case, even the rabbis would admit with Rabbi Yehuda that he's not allowed to get a haircut and do laundry. Because the rabbis only argue with Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to sort of to find an opportunity abroad, to explore an opportunity abroad. However, so there they argue and say nonetheless he's allowed to get a haircut and do laundry. But if he's just out to have a good time, so he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that he would not be allowed to get a haircut and do laundry. Avaloshut module, right? To have a good time, they admit to Rabbi Yehuda. V'nir and divrei Rabbanan le Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the rabbis that you would be allowed to get a haircut and do laundry k'shiyatzu b'rshus, when he went out with permission. Umayniu limzonis, if he went out, in order to be able to afford to have food, money for food. Shafilu Rabbi Yehuda lo nechlak aleim el la'avicha aval limzonos module. Because Rabbi Yehuda only argues with the Chachamim and says that it's usher when he's out to make a profit, right? When he goes out for business, the rabbis would say he's allowed to get a haircut and do laundry when he comes back. Rabbi Yehuda would say that he's not. And however, he would agree with the rabbis that if he's going for food, to make a basic living, so that he has money to buy food, so then when he comes back, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that he would be able to get a haircut and do laundry. That's interesting stuff, if you ask me. Amar Shmuel says, Shmuel, Ka'ina noled b'moed mutar legaleach b'moed. That if you have a little guy is born on Chol HaMoed, Mazel Tov. He's born very hairy. So mutar legaleach b'moed, you can give him a haircut on Chol HaMoed. She'encha beis asurin gadol mizeh, ho 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 ho. Friends, you hear that? Because there's no jail, there's no prison greater than being rolled up in a ball inside of a human tummy. So therefore, when he comes out, so then he's free, and he can get a haircut, just like people who are let out of prison can get haircuts. Okay. Bamoid in meikarelo. And now what we want to say is that that means that if he's born on Chol HaMoed, so then he'd be allowed to get a haircut. But if he was born before Chol HaMoed, so then he would not be allowed to get a haircut on Chol HaMoed. Most of Pinchas, but if Pinchas asks a kasha from a brayso, it says Kol elu she'amru mutar legaleach b'moed. So any of these examples that we say that he's allowed to get a haircut on Chol HaMoed, mutar legaleach bimei evlo. So you're also allowed to get a haircut if you were a mourner. Ha'asur legaleach b'moed, asur legaleach bimei evlo. But if you would not be allowed to get a haircut on Chol HaMoed, so then you would not be allowed to get a haircut during Avelus. V'omar kohen isbei plugta. And if you say that by a kohen, that by this little baby, there's a difference if he's born before Chol HaMoed or if he's born on Chol HaMoed, i.e. that also when it comes to a baby, there are certain times when he can get a haircut, certain times when he can't get a haircut. So then nimtzeis avelus noeges b'kohen. Then that sounds like we're saying that avelus applies to a kohen, right? Because if we're saying that this baby, it depends. If he was born before Chol HaMoed, he's not allowed to get a haircut on Chol HaMoed. If he's born on Chol HaMoed, he is allowed to get a haircut on Chol HaMoed. And we say that anybody who sort of, like, there are times when he's not allowed to get a haircut, times when he can't get a haircut. For example, a regular adult is not allowed to get a haircut on Chol HaMoed, right? He should have gotten a haircut before. But there are times when he's allowed to get one, such as if he was in prison and he was freed. So then he can get a haircut. And just like if he was in prison and he got freed, he can get a haircut on Chol Moed. So also if he was in prison and he got freed, he would be able to get a haircut if he was a mourner as well. And we're saying that, right, all of those people who would be allowed circumstantially to get a haircut on Chol Moed, they would also be allowed circumstantially to get a haircut when they are a mourner. And therefore, if we're saying that a baby is one of these examples when sometimes you can get a haircut on Chol Moed and sometimes you can't. If the baby was born before Chol Moed, he cannot get a haircut on Chol Moed. If he was born on Chol Moed, he can. Well then, and we're saying that anybody who circumstantially would be allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed would also be able to get a haircut when they're in Avel. And a baby is one of these examples on Chol Moed. So Memela, that means that a baby is also one of these examples when it comes to Avelus, right? If he's one of these examples by Chol Moed, he's also one of these examples by Avelus, implying that Avelus, mourning, the halachos of a mourner applied to a baby. We learn in the Brisa, that the reason why we tear kriya, why we render the garment of a child whose relative passed away, it's not because there's a chiyuv, it's not because there's a mitzvah to, but only so that people will get sad. People will see, wow, this little kid, look, he's wearing rendered clothing because a relative passed away. It's very, very sad. And that is why we rend his garment. Not because there's an obligation to, it's not because he has a chiyuv of avelus, it's just because we want everybody else who experiences a kid wearing rendered garments, they will all get sad. So therefore, meaning the point being that he doesn't have the halachas of avelus. So Ravashi says, mi katani ha asurin dilma yesh me'en asur v'yesh me'en mutter, right? It does, right? If we look at the Brisa, it's called Elu Shamu mutter legalech moed mutter legalech me'evlo ha asur legalech moed asur legalech me'evlo. It's singular, right? And therefore, it doesn't say asur, and it doesn't say that all of them necessarily are asur to get a haircut when they're a mourner. Rather, it says, right, asur, right? This one is asur kilu on an individual basis, right? It doesn't necessarily apply broadly to all of them, but maybe sort of each one individually, and excluding the katan, right? Meaning, while maybe somebody, an adult would not be allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed, but if he got out of jail, then yes, and then that applies also to mourning, but that wouldn't necessarily apply to a child. Some of them it applies to, some of them it doesn't. Meimar v'temer of Shisha b'der of Idi masni hochi. A Meimar, some takaser of Shisha b'der of Idi, teach the halacha in the following way. Omer Shmuel, says Shmuel, Katan mutter legalcho b'moed. A Katan, a little fellow, you're allowed to give him a haircut on Chol Moed, lo shna nolad b'moed, v'lo shna nolad meikar. And this is regardless of if the child was born on Chol Moed or before Chol Moed. Kilu, in this reading of it, Shmuel is saying that no matter what, you would be allowed to give a haircut on Chol Moed to this little fellow. Amr of Pinchas, says of Pinchas, it says of Pinchas that we can actually support this from a Mishnah. Kol elu she'amru muter legaleach b'moed, that any of these people that it says that they're allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed, muter legaleach b'me'evlo, they'd also be allowed to get a haircut as a mourner. Ha asur legaleach b'moed, asur legaleach b'me'evlo, and therefore anybody who is not allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed would not be allowed to get a haircut on as a mourner. Now, I'amad Katan Asur, and right, therefore, if you're meaning to back up a second, meaning so we're saying that anybody who's allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed is allowed to get a haircut as a mourner, and anybody who's not allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed is not allowed to get a haircut as a mourner. And therefore, if we're going to say that a baby that was born before Chol Moed is forbidden from getting is not allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed, well, in that case, that would also mean that he's not allowed to get a haircut as a mourner, right? I'amad Katan Asur, if you're saying that a Katan is not allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed, well then, right, if he was born before Chol Moed, Nimtzeis Avelus Noeges B'Katan. So then Memele, we're going to have to say that mourning, the halachos of a mourner, apply to a little fellow, right? Because we're saying that all of these people who are not allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed are not allowed to get a haircut as a mourner. V'tani makarin the katan mipnei agmas nefesh. And we have a brayso that says that the only reason why we rend the garment of a little fellow is so that everybody feels sad about the situation. Meaning that mourning does not apply. And therefore, if mourning does not apply to a little fellow, it makes sense to conclude that a little fellow can get a haircut on Chol Moed no matter what. That's what the Gemara wants to say. Amar Ravashi, to which Ravashi says not necessarily, because after all, mikatani ha asurin dilma yeshmen asav yeshmen mutter. It doesn't necessarily say that all of these people that are asur on Chol Moed are asur on as a velim, and right, okay, so therefore, right, it's possible that it's on like a situational basis, situation to situation basis, and therefore maybe you could make the argument that even if you were to say that a little fellow is unable to get a haircut on Chol Moed, maybe that would have no implication for mourning, and therefore we could theoretically maintain that a little fellow is not allowed to get a haircut on Chol Moed, and yet there's no nafkamine for mourning. All right, fine. What do you want me to tell you? Ovel eno noig aveluso baregel. A mourner does not practice his mourning on the festival. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "V'samachta b'chagecha." You shall be joyous on your festival. Iavelus demeikara hu. And if you have, meaning if you are a mourner before the festival began, asi esei derabim v'dachi esei deyachid. So the mitzvahs aseh of v'samachta b'chagecha, of being happy on the festival, will override the mitzvahs, the individual mitzvahs aseh, which is evel yachid asilach, make for yourself the mourning of an individual. So we see that there is right v'samachta b'chagecha, and there's also an essay, as Rashi pointed out, evel yachid asilach. So, and there's also a mitzvah saseh on the individual level that a fellow should mourn. So the sort of public mitzvah saseh will override the individual mitzvah saseh, and therefore you would not continue your avelus into the festival. V'i avelus dahashto, and if somebody passed away on the festival, so when the festival started there was no avelus, it was only v'samachta b'chagecha, and then somebody passed away, lo asi aseh diyachav v'dachi aseh derabim. So then this new mitzvahs aseh of on an individual level of mourning will not override the pre-existing public mitzvahs aseh of the samachta b'chagecha, and therefore either way you view it, either way you look at it, right, in any whichever context, whether the fellow was in mourning beforehand or whether somebody passed away on Chol Moed, either way, we would not practice mourning on the festival. Menuda maush yinok niduyo baregel. Frag the Gemara, what about a fellow who's excommunicated? Would he continue his? What does he get a break? Does he get a break for the festival? So Rav Yosef Tashma says Rav Yosef, comment here. Don in dine nefashis v'dine makis v'dine maminis. That on Chol Moed we're allowed to judge capital cases, we're allowed to judge lashes cases, and we're allowed to judge financial, monetary cases. V'ilo tzayiz dina, and if a fellow doesn't, is this what's called contempt to the court? A fellow, he's not listening to the verdict, mishamtinon lei, we excommunicate him. You hear that? So if Yosef says that in Chol Moed we're allowed to have court cases, and if one of the litigants is not listening to the outcome, to the verdict, so we can excommunicate the fellow. Right? And if, sorry, let's read that again. If it enters your mind, if it enters your mind to say that he gets a break from his excommunication on the festival, well then, if you have a fellow who was already a excommunicatee, I guess, from before the festival, and we're saying that comes the festival and he gets a break, what, we're going to make him an excommunicatee on the festival? If we're saying that sort of the festival overrides any excommunicated status, well then why would we suggest that we excommunicate a fellow who's not listening to the court on Chol Moed? It sounds like excommunication is useless against Chol Moed. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, "V'dimuli ayune bedine." Says Abaye, maybe what it means when we say to have court on Chol Moed, maybe it just means that we sort of look into the case, but we don't actually give the verdict and everything on Chol Hamoed. And if you don't say this, Dine Nefashis, when it comes to capital cases, de Katani, that it says over there, right? Meaning we gave 3 examples. It said Dine Nefashis, Dine Bakas, and Dine Mominis. So we gave 3 examples, one of them being capital cases, and we're talking about judging capital cases on Chol Hamoed. Hachinami de Kotlinon le. What, do you really think that we're going to kill the fellow on Chol Hamoed? But if they kill the fellow on Chol Hamoed, then in Mele they're going to be losing out on their ability to enjoy the festival. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brayso, Rabbi Kiva, Omer says Rabbi Kiva, the Sanhedrin Shargu Sanefesh, that if the Sanhedrin, if the big court had to kill a fellow, so how do we know Shein To'am and Kol Oso Hayom that they can't eat epis the rest of the day? Tamlomer lo sochlo al adam, because the pasuk says you cannot eat on blood. And therefore, if they had to kill a fellow, so they can't eat the rest of the day. And therefore, if they can't eat the rest of the day, they can't be enjoying themselves on Yom Tov. And therefore, Memele el yune bedine. So rather, says Abaye, what it must be talking about? It must be talking about when we judge capital cases on Chol Moed, it doesn't mean that we actually judge and hand down a verdict and act upon the verdict. Because if that's the case, then how can we be judging capital cases on Chol Moed? They're going to kill the fellow on Chol Moed, then they're not going to be able to eat and enjoy Chol Moed. So rather, el yune bedina must be just to sort of analyze the case, and therefore the same thing would apply as well to excommunication, right? That by monetary cases, if they say, hey, Reuven, you owe Shimon money, and then Reuven doesn't listen, so we're not actually going to excommunicate them on the festival. To which Rav Yosef responds to Abaye, what do you mean? That's not really plausible. And Kenim says, Ma'ana es dino. Says Rav Yosef, you can't just have a situation where you have a fellow who's being tried for a capital case, and they're going to have the court case, and they're not actually going to give a verdict. They're just going to kind of leave him hanging. So, meaning hanging while he's waiting for a verdict. Yidden don't actually hang people, although right, it says kol and eskol and nislin. Upon him. But hanging is not one of the Arba Mitzvahs Bezdin. But it says of Yosef, we don't be ma'ane sadin, but we don't just kind of let things drag on, right? I was reading somewhere that in the United States of America, people pashit could be on death row for ages and ages, to the extent that pashit they don't even, right, or at least at a time, I don't know where things stand now, but there isn't actually any place that manufactures that deadly vaccine. To the extent that you have pashut people on death row who are asking to just be killed already, but the Maisa, there isn't actually a way to kill these people. So they just pashut stay in this in-between state. And anyways, so we don't want to do that. And therefore, says Rav Yosef, you can't just have Bezdin convene and then not sort of make a decision. So no, so rather, yes, it's true that if Bezdin has to kill somebody, they can't eat that day. But how do you answer the question about Simchas Yom Tov? The answer is that they come in the morning, and they, I don't know, do Bezdin stuff all day. And then they go back and they eat and drink and have a good time on the festival. Then they come back at the end of the day and they hand down a verdict, and if need be, they kill the fellow. Interesting. Okay, fine. So therefore, Rav Yosef actually does want to say that we do execute verdicts on Chol HaMoed, and therefore we actually would excommunicate a fellow on Chol HaMoed, and therefore, Memele, if we are going to excommunicate a fellow on Chol HaMoed, so Memele, excommunication applies on Chol HaMoed. So Amar Abaye says, Abaye, but wait, Tashma, Umunuda Sheitiru Lo Chacham. Abaye says, if we look at our Mishnah, one of the situations where a fellow can get a haircut, maybe also wash his clothes as well. Yeah, wash his clothes as well. Is a fellow who is menuda. He was excommunicated. Sheitir lo chachamim. And Abaye wants to understand that to mean that all people who are excommunicated, the rabbis undo their excommunication on Chol HaMoed. That's how Abaye wants to understand it, i.e. that there's no concept of excommunication on Chol HaMoed. So Amar Rava, says Rava, mikatani sheitiruhu chachamim, sheitiru lo chachamim katani. Rava says no. The Mishnah does not say, right, menuda sheitiruhu chacham, that an excommunicated fellow, that the chacham just blanketly permitted his excommunication. No, sheitiru lo chacham, that the chacham were matir his excommunication, not that just automatically his undoing of excommunication happened. The Chacham actually, specifically on a specific case basis, undid his excommunication. That the fellow went and actually did what he was supposed to, and I guess paid back the person he was supposed to pay back, whatever it was. And then he came to the rabbis and says, "Look, I was being good. I did what I was supposed to." And they say, okay, well then you're no longer excommunicated. And in that case, he can do laundry, whatever it is. But it's not that by default there's no excommunication on Chol HaMoed. Alright, well, so it sounds like a fellow who's excommunicated does not get a break on Chol HaMoed. Sorry, buddy. Mitzora, Ma'u sheyinig tzaraito b'regel. What if you have a fellow? The fellow is a mitzora. The fellow is a leper. Ma'ushiyinig tzaraito b'regel. So does his status of leprosy, right? Does he have to stay outside of the three camps? Does that sort of continue during the festival? Amar Abaye Toshma. So Abaye says, well, v'anozav mitzora mitumasul l'tayraso. So it says that when you have a nazir or a mitzora, that when they then became if they were tameh and then they became tahor, so habi me tumaso noig. That the Mishnah was talking about a situation where you have a mitzora or you have a nazir who became, the nazir became tameh, tmei, so you have mitzora who is already tameh and then they become tahor. And we're saying that then they can get they get a haircut, they wash their clothing. It says Abaye, implying that up until then, right, if they become tahor on the third day of Chol HaMoed, let's say, so then the first 3 days of Chol HaMoed, they're tameh. They're taka tameh. So there you have it. That on the day that they become tahor, they can get a haircut and wash their clothing, but until then they're tameh. So the Gemara says not necessarily lo mi ba yakamar. We could say that the Mishnah is actually saying like not only this, but even that. Lo mibaya b'mei tumaso de lo naig. Certainly, when they're tameh, Yom Tiv Chol HaMoed supersedes it, and therefore, if you have a mitzora, comes Chol HaMoed, he can come back into the camp. Aval tayraso, but when it becomes time for him to become tahor, if he now becomes tahor, I might think in that case, Nigzor Shema Yasha Korbanosa. I might say that when he becomes tahor, then he dafka cannot get a haircut and he cannot do his laundry, because immediately when he gets a haircut, then he has to bring his korbanos, and maybe we'll be concerned that if he has to bring a korban, maybe he won't bring it on the right day, and he might bring it on Shmini Atzeres, and we don't want him to do that. So maybe we would say that he would not bring his korbanos when he becomes tahor. So Kamash Malan, what the Mishnah is saying is that on the day that he becomes tahor, so then he does bring his korbanos. We're not concerned that he might bring it on Shmini Atzeres. Amar Rava, says Rava, Tashma v'atzarua, the Rabbis Kohen Gadol, says Rava, that when the pasuk says V'atzarua shebo anega, that the tzarua who has this tzaras, l'rabus kohen gadol, and we want to say that that includes a kohen gadol, to say that even a kohen gadol is able to get tzaras. Okay. V'kohen gadol d'chol hashana kiregel l'chuli alma dami. Now, when it comes to a kohen gadol the entire year long has the same status of everybody else, or as a kohen hedged at least. No, or actually everybody else. The Tanan is, we learned in the Mishnah, kohen gadol makriv onein ve'eino ochel, that a kohen gadol is able to offer a korban as an onein, he just can't eat it. So meaning, a kohen gadol, if somebody passes away before the burial, so he's an onein, so he's allowed to offer korbanos as an onein. No other Kohen is allowed to offer korbanos as a Kohen, and no non-Kohen is allowed to send korbanos to be offered as an onein. However, there's an exception, which is on Chol Moed. On Chol Moed, they are allowed to offer as an onein, and therefore, basically, a Kohen Gadol the entire day of the year is the same as everybody else on Chol Moed, i.e., that they're allowed to offer as an onein, and we're saying Shmamina noeg tzaraito baregel shmamina. If we're saying that a Kohen Gadol, who is basically the equivalent of everybody else on Chol Moed, right? A Kohen Gadol the entire year has the same status as everybody else on when they're on Chol Moed, i.e., that he's allowed to offer korbanos as an onein, and yet we're saying he's able to get tzaras. So memele, everybody else on Chol Moed is able to get tzaras, right? Kilo, a Kohen Gadol the entire year is like everybody else on Chol Moed, and therefore if a Kohen Gadol the entire year is able to get tzaras, so then everybody else on Kohen Gadol on Chol Moed is also able to get tzaras. Alright, well there you go. Avil Elser b'tisparis, we say that an Avel, a mourner, is not allowed to get a haircut. From the fact that the Eibishter had to say to Elazar and Isomer that Roshechem al tifro, do not grow out your hair when Nadav and Avihu died, meaning by default, an Avel would not be allowed to cut his hair, and Hashem Davka had to tell them, because it was during the Miluim, when the Mishkan was being set up, he said, do not grow out your hair, do get a haircut, implying that the default would be that you are not allowed to get a haircut as a mourner. Alright, we're going to stop here, although I realized as I was reading that last line that I probably should have stopped right before that last line, because we're starting kind of like a new flow now. But I'll go upon him. Anyways, that was Daf Yudal. Some interesting stuff there, right? Elu Megalchin, the new parak of these are the people who can get haircuts on Chol Moed, right? We saw that there are certain people that can get haircuts, but by default you cannot. Certain people could do laundry, by default you cannot. We said it's because we want you to come to the festival when you've already sort of gotten a haircut, you've already done your laundry. We talked about traveling, right? If a fellow is traveling and he comes back on Chol Moed, can he get a haircut and do laundry? So he said, well, it depends. If he's just going out for fun, then no. If he's going out because he needs to make a living and he came back on Chol Moed, yes. What if he just went out to do business? So then it's machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda, who says he cannot get a haircut, and the Chacham, who say that he can. We said that a child, Avelus does not apply to a child, that we only tear kriya for a child just to make everybody sad about what's going on, but not necessarily because there's a chiv of Avelus. We said that Avelus does not apply on Chol HaMoed, on Yom Tiv, because V'samachtu b'chagecha overrides the mitzvahs of Avelus. We said that excommunication, it sounds like it would apply on Chol HaMoed, and as well, we said that Tzaras, it was a kind of a shaila. Abai says that Tzaras does not, would apply on Chol HaMoed. We then said that maybe Tzaras doesn't. Rava says that, just like a Kohen Gadol can get Tzaras, and Kohen Gadol is like everybody else on Chol HaMoed, so everybody else also can get Tzaras. And then we started talking about different things that apply to Avelim, and we're going to see also by excommunicated people and Mitzorah people. That's sort of the continuation. We started by saying that mourners do not get haircuts, and we're going to pick up from there tomorrow. Friends, peace out.